Welcome to the podcast, Your Future in Sales and Marketing, the podcast that helps you make great career decisions. My name is Mike Dixon, and I'm a professional sales and marketing recruiter. I love what I do, but my biggest frustration is seeing too many people not realizing their career potential. In this podcast, I'll introduce you to my network, an amazing group of business leaders from the biggest tier 1 organizations through to some super fast growth SMEs. They'll share their career journeys and give unique advice and insights on managing your career and leading a function and a business. Join me, Mike Dixon of AXR Recruitment and Search, to help guide your future in sales and marketing. Well, hello and welcome to the podcast, Your Future in Sales and Marketing, with me, Mike Dixon, Director of AXR Recruitment and Search. Now, our purpose at AXR is to equip you with everything you need to make a great career decision, to get the most out of your career journey. Today's guest is a marketer who's led sales teams and businesses, a career many future leaders would love to emulate. So let's find out how you've done it. Nicole Parker, Director of Marketing and Ecom at Weber Barbecues. Welcome to the pod.
Thanks, Mike. Great to be here.
Well, it's good to have you. And we're going to kick off, as always, with a couple of questions to get to know you better.
Okay.
What's your favorite brand? And you must pick one you've never worked on.
Sure. I will pick one that I love as a consumer, not worked on. I really love Mecca Cosmetica. I mean, it's a great Australian business model, but I find the retail experience is so engaging. The staff are so knowledgeable. You walk into there, it feels like a bazaar. There's so much choice available to you, so many amazing products and brands. It could be quite overwhelming, but the staff are really well trained and help consumers to guide them through their purchase journeys. I think their whole one-to-one marketing, the CRM and their first-party data management is excellent. I always end up buying more than I anticipated. I'm always checking my points balance to see when's my next beauty loop bonus and when am I going to progress up to the next tier. So that's one I really love. And I thought I might mention another one briefly. Again, as an Australian, I do have a soft spot for Qantas. And I do...
Controversial.
Controversial, I know, but I really feel that as an Australian, when you travel the world and you see the red roux, there's some nostalgia and a sense of home that comes back to you instantly. And I really feel that if they can go back to thinking about and putting the consumer first, not the shareholder or what some of the perhaps other priorities have been over the last few years, that they'll be able to gain back the loyalty of the Australian public. But it's going to be a very interesting journey and look forward to seeing how they manage it.
Yeah, I think there's enough brand equity in it. They'll be able to do it. I think it's probably a short-term frustration the public have got.
Yeah.
I think they'll get it back.
Yeah.
No, good one. Okay, good too.
Yeah.
All right, and get to know you a little bit more, Nicole. Before we jump into your career journey, just tell us a little bit where you're from, early life. Where did you grow up?
Born and bred in Sydney, but my parents were immigrants from Italy. So I grew up with parents in hospitality. My parents owned a business. So yeah, the world of sales and marketing was not really very apparent as I was growing up, but lots of wonderful memories of hardworking family and seeing that hard work could be translated into success, as well as seeing that despite the limitations that come from people that move halfway around the world and English wasn't their native language, that they could build a really successful new life in Australia. And I think that was a really inspiring part of growing up, is living these two cultures and seeing how in me, both of those are still very prevalent today.
Yeah, but making this political, I always find it really interesting when people talk about immigration, the power of immigration to positively change a country. And Australia is a country where growth comes from immigration.
Yes.
And I've kind of welcome whatever government's going to actually support more immigration, because I think it's a good thing. So I think we're in that phase again where we're actually allowing people back in the country, thank goodness.
Yes, yes.
Immigrants don't come here to do anything other than work hard, in my view.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's right.
Good. So anyone looking at your LinkedIn profiles, as I was doing earlier this week in prep for this, and I thought, it's interesting, you started out in marketing at L'Oreal, but I remember thinking, no, I don't think you did. I think you started a bit earlier than that. And then when digging further, it was advertising was your first kind of major gig. Tell us about the early days and then, how and why did you get into advertising?
Oh, Mike, your private investigative skills are second to none.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I did spend the first 3 to 4 years of my professional career working in advertising, because when I went to university and I had this very broad idea that I was going to do a business commerce degree and focus on marketing, and people said, well, what's marketing? And I just thought marketing was advertising. And I loved ads growing up. I mean, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. TV jingles were prevalent, and it just seemed very glamorous as well. The whole production behind the scenes of how ads were made just seemed like this whole other world that I'd never experienced before. So I felt quite excited about pursuing that as my first professional step outside of university.
Great. And the shift from advertising to client side, it can be quite tough, over the years.
Yeah.
A lot of people have tried to do it. Some do it, some don't. We've actually taken it on as a topic in the pod a couple of times in the past. But how did you find it? And why did you want to transition into marketing client side?
Yeah. Well, advertising is wonderful. It is very creative. It's also very hard work. And it was a fun industry to work at in my early to mid 20s. But as I started going to more and more client briefings, I started feeling like I wanted to be sitting on the other side of the table. I wanted to be the one writing and delivering the brief to the agency rather than being the ones responding to it. And so I dwelled on this for months. And in the end, I was quite miserable, I'll be honest. I'd kind of made the mental decision to move on, but hadn't actually really had the courage to do something significant about it. And I think it was my New Year's resolution. I was speaking to my boyfriend at the time, now husband, and he said, do you know what? Just leave. He said, you're not going to focus on what that next career step is if you're so busy at work. You don't have major financial commitments at that age that you can't meet. So quit. And I thought, oh my God, I can't quit a job without another job. Who does that? But I did. And it was probably one of the bravest things I've ever done, because it did make me then focus on myself and what outcome I wanted to achieve. And I probably was out of work for a few months. It was difficult to kind of get a foot in the door with the right companies and certainly with the right recruitment agencies. So I also spent that time reviewing my skills, and I went and did a course in public relations and one in what they called direct marketing at the time, just to make sure that I was up to date with the relevant skills for marketers, as well as continue my learning and development.
Great. And you go into L'Oreal, and I think a lot of FMCG marketers look at consumer categories and think like, beauty, luxury, apparel, liquor, and think, they're a bit like FMCG, just a bit slower, aren't they? But they're quite different. Your brands typically, when you were at L'Oreal and Pacific Brands, but now Hanes, you watch some really cool luxury brands, of higher end brands. How would you contrast actually marketing those brands to more mainstream FMCG?
Well, I would challenge anyone who says that it's a slower pace or less competitive industry. That is so far from the truth. And I still look at the cosmetics category today and think it is the most competitive and saturated market of any consumer goods category, because there are so many brands, there are so many channels of distribution, and so many of those brands have very similar brand propositions. So how do you cut through and create space for yourself? And how do you find your unique proposition to a consumer? It's a very challenging thing to do. And on top of that, you've got a very discrete seasonality with cosmetics. There's colours that are suitable for summer, colours that are suitable for winter, skincare for summer, skincare for winter, things that happen in between season as well. Every 4 to 6 weeks, you have to keep animating, bring activity to market, keep the consumer engaged. So whether that is promotional activity or bringing new, not major launches, but new colour stories and activities like that to bring theatre and life and create consumer interest. It keeps you very busy as a marketer.
It's almost like a broader role, isn't it? There's more to it than perhaps the more formulaic, 4 Ps of FMCG. Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. And it's also in the majority a universal product. So you're not just competing with the Australian marketplace and Australian retailers and consumers. You've got the global influence as well. It's a very easily portable product.
Cool. Now, I love your next move. You then went to Nestle, or more specifically, an Espresso, to head up marketing there when the brand was probably reasonably in its infancy to 2010. It must have been a really sought after role. I reckon a lot of people have said, actually, I really fancy that, because you could sense even back then there was a lot of money being spent in building a brand globally. How did you get it, and why did they pick you?
Yeah, thanks. I'd say it comes down to a couple of things. Partly my experience of having worked on a premium but still accessible consumer product, and the power of your professional network. So something I'd learned early on was around developing a professional relationship with people I'd worked with, or with my partners in agency and in media. So the opportunity came to me through a contact I had. And yeah, fortunately, they really liked the fact that I'd worked for L'Oreal in the luxury products division. So I'd had that exposure to the premium brands, and that I'd also had exposure working with a European business.
And so what was the brief? What were you asked to do?
Gosh, everything. So it was a pretty risky move because I was the first marketing headcount for Nespresso Australia, New Zealand.
Oh, really? You're the number one hire?
Number one hire. So it was, up until then, marketing had basically been a little bit of trade marketing, which had been, we need to print some point of sale to put in some retail stores. So this was a creation of a discrete marketing function that was separate from sales. And the brief was really about everything. It was about growing awareness, consideration, and ultimately conversion. So right through that purchase decision funnel. And then to the side of that, this is a brand that has a direct to consumer business model. So really critical here is the first party data. And in 2010, that was a fairly, emerging category. Not many of us were thinking about how do you build that lifetime value with consumers, and how do you start to develop a single customer view over time. So I found that fascinating. I still do. So a large part of the brief was also around what can we do to attract, to grow, and then retain our active consumer base. So a big part of that comes into the expansion of the boutique network or the retail network, certainly the role of .com and the website experience that it would provide. Transactional, yes, but also the educational and the entertainment side of it. And I guess the third one was about making a global product relevant to the local market. So Nespresso is part of Nestle, so it was born in Europe, and in Europe, most people drink black coffee. If you've ever been to Italy, you can drink a cappuccino until 11 a.m. and then no milk after 11 a.m., right? So that's completely different to how we drink coffee in Australia and New Zealand. 90% of us drink coffee with milk in it. So we had to find a way to adapt a global brand and make it look and feel relevant to local consumers and customs.
And did you have a blueprint from Nestle as to how to do that? Or did you have the remit to make that up?
Not really, no. It's not to say that Nestle didn't provide some guidance. It certainly does, but there's no blueprint from Switzerland that says you must do it this way. There was a fair degree of autonomy for the local market when it came to finding how to make the product work for its audience. So I certainly had a lot of convincing to do from a comms perspective, that I had to really work hard with my team and also soliciting fact-based data in market research and third-party data to support a case that said, hey, you know what, the global brand comms that you develop with George Clooney, his wonderful ambassador, and did a huge job in growing brand awareness for Nespresso in the early years. But he's always photographed with a short black. And in Australia, we don't really understand that as a coffee beverage. So here's the data that says 90% of Australians drink a coffee with milk in it. Can we start to look at ways that locally we can adapt that conversation? And yes, George can have his short black, but let's showcase other ways locally we can make our product relevant to consumers.
That involved flying George over to Sydney and...
If only. I did meet George once. I was very lucky to have met him, and I still have a photo, which I keep in my home office, of me with George and a signed, like a paper napkin from the restaurant we were sitting in, because I thought this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I either take it or it's gone, and I took it. And now I have the photo and the signature.
Very good. I'm glad you said your home office. I thought you were going to say your handbag and you're going to show it to me.
Not quite.
Cool. Now, the next move is really interesting for pod listeners because you're on this marketing trajectory. You could, from that, taking Nespresso from a relatively small brand to very quickly a very large brand, and it's true, it was an amazing journey, Nicole, that you and your team achieved there. You could have probably jumped into almost any marketing gig you wanted, but you chose to then stay in the Nestle world, Nespresso world, and actually lead the sales function.
Yeah.
How did that happen? What was the logic and rationale from your perspective of that move?
Well, I had the longer term ambition that I wanted to lead a business unit. And certainly in the Nestle world at the time, it was very clearly communicated that the pathway to general management, yes, it came from marketing and other functions, but sales was a critical function that any future general manager had to have exposure to. And I'll be honest, and maybe the listeners have heard this before, sales and marketing are so closely intertwined. It's not uncommon that a marketer will be told you should spend some time working in sales in your career and a salesperson told to spend some time in marketing. And that happens. But I did it because, yes, I was working on that longer term plan to lead the business unit, but I was confident, I guess is what I want to say. If I had been told to do that earlier in my career, I probably would have self-doubted that I'd have had the confidence and the ability to go to a sales meeting, which sometimes are pleasant and sometimes people are negotiating for what they want and they can be a bit tense. And I felt ready that I was able to sit in that kind of environment and have those conversations and back myself.
And were you supported in terms of, hey, this is what to expect? You know, we're going to help you develop some skills in this area, or were you straight in and making up as you went along?
A little bit of both. So I was fortunate that I stayed in the same organization. So I knew the people and I knew the predecessor in the role who was still in the organization. He was just promoted into a different role. So I had the support of the organization and I was familiar with the company. I knew what we were doing. So that part was easy in a way. But I guess for a lot of us, most of our line managers or leaders have become that role because they've developed competence in a function over time. They were considered experts and because they did their job so well, they were promoted up and up through the ranks. And I thought, well, my challenge I felt at the time was, how am I going to convince a group of salespeople that a marketer can lead the function? I haven't come through field sales or key account management. I've just turned up and I'm the director of sales. So yeah, I'd say there was some support, but there was certainly not a list of, here's how you do the job.
Here's your sales director training course. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Just get in there. And you were managing, because you mentioned before it was a D2C model, but at that point you were also selling through retailers.
Yes, that is, I should say that the espresso business model is a little complicated, but there's a very large part of our business, which are the coffee machines that are sold through wholesale retailers.
Yeah. And what do you think you brought as a marketer to a sales leadership role? And is that, and I guess there's probably two parts to this question, because I'm also thinking generally for marketers who are perhaps taking your advice going, I probably should get into sales at some point, to give them some comfort that they actually have something to offer.
Absolutely. I'd say a couple of things. The first thing I did at the time is I found this article that had been published by McKinsey, and it was titled, "We Are All Salespeople." So the first meeting I had with the sales team, I actually copied this and gave them a copy. And I said, so I know that I haven't come through the ranks or the hierarchy like some of you have, but I want you to know that intrinsically we're all salespeople, and marketing, well, we're actually helping to sell. So it's not as strange as you might think. We don't live that far apart from each other. In fact, organizationally, we are working towards the same goals. It might just be that our priorities are a little different from time to time. And that's sometimes where we might have some tension or different ways of working. But I said, look, I think it's really important that you also understand that, yes, I've got an expertise in my functional area and I've worked in this organization, I think it was for 6 years at that time, but I haven't stopped learning and I really want to learn from you. So I'm going to be honest and open about where I don't know how to do things, and I'm going to rely on you and your expertise to help me, and we'll work it out. I said, similarly, there are things that you should understand better. You're very customer focused, but you need to also consider the end consumer. What's going to motivate the end consumer to want to come and seek out our product and then purchase it? If you're focused just on your retail customer, you might be missing the forest for the trees, so to speak. So let me try and help you to rethink the priority here. The customer is enabling us to get to the end consumer. And sometimes, with the salespeople, they're so caught up in the day-to-day, I've got to make the budget for the month, the quarter, the half, the year, that they'll do things that are relevant perhaps in the short term, but may not be in the company or the consumer's best interest in the mid to long term.
Yeah, I think there's two things in there. One is you bring in a consumer lens to a customer conversation, which I think the customer would probably quite like. And then secondly, taking away from the cut and thrust of the moment and winning in the moment. Yeah. But actually, how does that moment ladder up to something that's going to achieve longer term goals for you and your customer? Right. They've got to love that, haven't they, surely? Yeah. I like it. That's a really nice way of putting it.
Thank you.
Really good. So you did then make the move to general management. So the sales and marketing, it wasn't within Nestle. You moved externally to Bodum to run, which is a kind of a global kitchenware business as the AU GM. How did all that happen?
Sure. I really enjoyed my time at Nespresso and Nestle. I could have stayed there, but a big pathway in an organization, an international organization like Nestle, usually requires time spent working overseas. And at that point in time in my life, that wasn't really an option for my family and I. So I wasn't actively looking. I kind of was looking, what you call passively, I guess.
Which everyone always should be aware of what the market is.
Most definitely. But I was actually headhunted for this role. And when I went through the interview process, I realized that the final interview stage was going to be with Mr. Jürgen Bodum himself. It's a family-owned business, so he's the owner of the company. And I thought, well, yes, in addition to answering the interview and doing the psychometric testing and the like, that I needed to build a personal rapport with him, because if I was going to be working for him, we needed to get on well. I was going to report to him and he needed to have the confidence that I could look after his business and his money, of course. And so I thought, well, what do we have in common? Coffee. We have one of Bodum's biggest selling and best known products is the Chambord coffee press. I'd worked in coffee for 10 years at this stage, so we started having a chat about coffee, and the interview ended up being more like a conversation, a chat between friends, rather than a question answer and feeling really on edge. And I feel that by the end of it, we'd both kind of felt like we were in a good place with each other.
Mm-hmm. So finding that common ground was super interesting. And when you got into your GM role, did you feel you had everything from day one ready to go to be a GM, or was there a lot to learn?
There was a lot to learn. I mean, I did have the benefit of some executive coaching before I started the role. And one of the pieces of advice I was given was to work before I'd started on a 30, 60 and 90-day plan, which I did. And that was a good framework in the first 3 months to keep some disciplines around what was the kind of information and fact finding I needed to do while I was still seeing the organization with fresh eyes, so to speak. The other thing I had to contend with was it was a completely different business model. I went from Nestle as the largest food and beverage company in the world. That's 100 billion Swiss francs turnover per annum. I'm now working for a family business and my boss is in Switzerland and I'm here running the show. That was very different for me, and very limited systems and processes and ways of working, no forms to complete and workflows to go through. You have to adapt. And I had to lean very heavily on the local team that were here to say, show me the way you do things, because in some ways I've gotten used to working in a very structured way and I need to unlearn that. And it was good. It was a very stark contrast, but it was a very rewarding experience.
Cool. And you were there for sort of 3 and a bit years.
Yeah.
When you look back, what sort of impact do you think you had? Where did the business go over that period compared to what you inherited?
I started in 2019.
Yeah.
And so less than 12 months in, the pandemic hit. So I am really proud that in that period of time, the team and I launched eCommerce, Australia and New Zealand. It had been on the cards, but wasn't really a priority. But when the need started to become very apparent, I was able to get the team on board and we were able to turn around the launch of eCommerce in 5 days in Australia. So I was really proud that we were able to just mobilize and focus on doing this one thing. I'm really proud of the business's performance in that time period because the financial year 2021, the business recorded its highest ever sales revenue and profitability. So I felt from a results-focused revenue generation, KPIs, I'd exceeded those and I felt really proud about that. And I felt really proud of the work the team had done. It's a small business in this part of the world and it's a small team, but we all work together really, really well, despite our diverse functional knowledge and ways of working. And in the time period I'd been there, there was 0 headcount loss. Prior to me arriving, the turnover had been sitting at around about 50% per annum. So I was really proud of my ability to keep the team together and keep the business going despite the challenges that COVID brought our way.
It's awesome. Really, really fantastic 3 years then. Very, very good job. And we're kind of almost up to date because you're now the, as I said right at the beginning of the pod, director of marketing and e-com at Weber Barbecues. So very well-known brand. I've been a Weber, user for years.
Thank you.
I had assumed it was an Aussie business, but I remember when we chatted not long after you went there, you were like, no, it's not Australian at all. But what attracted you back to business like that and also back into a marketing role?
I felt that, first of all, I think when I look at Weber, I agree. Most people I know assume Weber is an Australian business. It's a global business, but it was founded in the United States in Chicago. And what I really admire about the Weber brand is how this is a brand that, even though it's a global brand, it has integrated so well into its local cultures, whether that's here in Australia or in other markets. People feel very passionate about the food they consume and the way they prepare food. And if I think about Australia, I think about the Aussie summer, backyard, in the pool, backyard cricket, barbecues on, right? And so it just feels emotionally very connected to our way of life. So I love that. And I love the fact that this is a global brand that allows the brand to behave so locally. I think that's extraordinary and has done so for years before it became fashionable to do so. Why did I kind of move back into a functional role? I loved my time at Bodum, but I think I started to feel that I'd gone from a really big organization where learning and development was a really important focus for employees to a small family business where perhaps the opportunities to learn and develop from other people were limited. And I started to miss that. And we were talking earlier about TikTok. And I feel like if I'd left my decision to come back to marketing a bit longer, then I would have missed out some of the revolutionary changes that have happened in the media landscape and the way brands connect with consumers. And e-commerce was just the tipping point of that. But social media and the digitization of marketing are things that really excite me and I get inspired by. And yeah, I didn't want to feel like I was going to miss out.
Great. The TikTok reference, guys, just watch out. AXR and this pod might be coming to a TikTok channel near you soon. But what can we expect from Weber? Where's Weber going to go in Australia?
Well, our ambition is to be in everybody's backyard around the country, whether you have a large home or a balcony or a space in between. We want to make sure that we have the right product to suit you. And sometimes we talk about Weber being an entertainment business rather than it being about selling a product or an appliance or a cooking device. It's not so much about what you're cooking, it's the experience that happens around it. You have a barbecue, you invite people over, having great chat, you're enjoying good food, but you're also having a really great connection with people. So we talk about wanting to create delicious food and amazing memories. So that's what our ambition is.
Okay, so take that concept and imagine what that could look like. I think some innovation coming along.
Perhaps.
What I'm hearing under the
Perhaps.
Okay, cool. And so in terms of you, Nicole, where do you go next? And probably the second part of that question is longer term goals as well. Do you kind of set those type of goals and think about the steps, or are you just immersed in the moment?
No, I do. I've always done what I call a skill audit of my career. Every year I look at what skills I've developed and where are my areas of development, and tried to, with my career moves, tried to, I guess, develop on those areas so that I could round myself out as a marketer, but also as a business leader. I'd say for now, I'm really enjoying the opportunity at Weber. We have just relaunched the Q barbecue range. So Q is Australia's favourite selling barbecue. So being given the role and responsibility of doing that was, you feel certainly the weight of doing that. You really don't want to get that one wrong, right? So I'm really excited that this project that I've been working on for 18 months has come to life recently. And I'm very excited over the next 12 months to see how it goes. Further to that, I still have the ambition to lead a business unit or a business in itself, probably something mid to large size. So that's definitely still on the radar for me. And probably further out to that is, if I think about maybe things like non-executive board roles and being able to use my skills to help other organizations navigate their sales and marketing and perhaps other wider business challenges and opportunities.
Cool. There's a podcast we did, probably a year and a half ago now, exploring the move from the exec team to the board with a lady called Cheryl Heyman, who's an ex-CMO. And she describes it beautifully. How did she prepare for that transition? So I'd encourage you and others who are thinking NED down the line. It's a great pod to listen to in terms of actually what does an NED do? How do you build up an NED career?
Yes.
How do you profile yourself with the right people to get the roles as well? So it's cool. Now you've worked in some really different businesses. We've touched on some, large, medium, and small, and different categories and different journeys and so forth. I'm curious about you as a leader. Does your style vary? Do you have to adapt your approach according to the scope and scale of a business? Or is it kind of, hey, I am who I am and I'll just kind of, you get me whether you like me or not?
Yeah, you do have to adapt. I mean, the difference of working for a listed organization versus a family business and dealing with the owner direct is worlds apart. You know, in a listed organization, you've got certain checks and balances and rigors you need to adhere to. There are ways of working and discrete time periods for reporting, for example. So the way you conduct yourself with the executive team or the board is very different to when you're speaking one-on-one to the owner of the business, and it's his or her personal money on the line. So, yeah, I would say for me, it was sometimes about simplifying the language and just talking directly with the owner and asking him what was his risk profile like and how far was he prepared to go on certain decisions, because it's a bit different when someone's investing their own money versus that of the shareholders, isn't it? So what doesn't change, though, is the approach to the work. It's always done at a high standard and a professionalism. You need to do the diligence. I think that going from marketing to sales and then to leading a business really honed my financial acumen. And it's something I would encourage marketers to do. Is sometimes marketers, we get into this level of detail around KPIs that might make sense in the world of marketing, but are a bit irrelevant to the CFO or to the MD of your business. So being literate with the way the organization speaks to its financial success or its KPI management is really key. So understanding the way a P&L works and the balance sheet, the role of inventory management, and how does the equation work from net sales and gross margin. These are really important constructs that help not just marketers, but anyone start to take not just a functional, but a broader organizational view on the company. And I think that was a really important step to working, whether it's with an owner or with an executive leadership team, is being comfortable with the way they talk about the business's success.
That sales piece is interesting because you talked to the kind of dialing up the commercial muscle and seeing the P&L from a different perspective. Now, the sales cycle is shorter, but you've got to deliver against this. You've got to deliver today, tomorrow, this quarter, this month, this year, as well as building a brand over time, which marketers are more used to. So I think, obviously your move hugely helped. But interesting, very interesting. And now for kind of listeners who do see the destination as the MD, GM, CEO of the future, what could they be doing in their mid to early career around their decisions to just put those foundations in place like you did?
I would say a couple of things. I mean, first of all, do evaluate what your skills are and what your strengths are and where some areas of development might be for you. Because if you want to lead an organization, you do have to learn to have a wider organizational view than, the functional expertise. So invest the time in getting to understand how does supply chain in your organization work and how do you get the product from its point of manufacture to the warehouse to the consumer or the customer. Understand that journey. Spend time with the finance team as well in understanding, well, how does the P&L operate? Not just my side to it, which is the marketing budget or the, say, salary related costs, but how does your sales in, sales out? How do I read a P&L and how do I start to understand the financial health of an organization? I think that's a really important step. So if you can, whether it's through maybe a structured project team or whether you can be seconded into a different project, I think speak to your line manager about being given some opportunities to work with people outside of your functional area. I would say then the other is be curious. You don't think you know it all because you don't. And I thought at 25 I knew it all and I most certainly didn't when I look back. And I'm sure I'll look at myself at 65 and say, yeah, you didn't know anything back then. So be curious and don't always assume that you know the right way of doing things. That I like diversity in teams. And when you start working with people outside of your functional area, you do start to get diverse opinions or ways of working. And I admit at first I used to feel frustrated by that. Why are they questioning me? You know, why don't they just believe what I'm saying? And I realized that it wasn't about them, it was about me and the way I'm reacting to a situation. So I have to, and I don't admit that I do this all the time, I still get frustrated. But I do check myself and say, hey, you know, perhaps that person is adding some value to the conversation here. Maybe they're asking us to think about a different perspective or a different way of working because they're seeing a different opportunity that I'm not seeing. So stay curious, question, say, hey, I hadn't really thought of it that way. Can you explain to me how you got there?
Really good advice. We're coming towards the end. Let's do the last question now.
Okay.
What's the best piece of career advice you've ever been given?
Sure. This comes from a very good friend of mine, but she was the head of HR at one of the companies I worked for. And she always said, the best promoter for you in your career is you. Don't rely on your line manager or the HR team or someone else to do it for you. You've got to step out of the passenger seat and into the driver's seat of your career. So don't be afraid to promote your achievements, as well as tell people where it is you want to go on your career journey. Don't be arrogant, but do take control. Don't feel that others are doing it for you. You're the best advocate for you in your career.
Great. Couldn't say it better myself. Thanks, Nicole. Thanks for sharing your insights and experience. Wonderful journey. Loved.
Thank you.
Hearing more about it. So that was just great. And thanks to you guys for listening. The podcast has prompted you to take a fresh look at your career goals, or then reach out to me or any of my team at AXR Recruitment and Search. We'd love to chat with you. And before we finish, what's the most common question we get asked as a recruiter, do you think, Nicole?
How do I get more money?
Close, probably the second one. How's the market? We get that every day, time and time. So we've actually written a blog on this, which we're putting out monthly, called How's the Market, which answers that question for you. Actually, the third edition's out today. It'll be, it's on LinkedIn already, on our website, and to the lucky 3,000 people will have it in their inbox as well. But if you haven't got it, reach out to me and we'll make sure you're on the list. It's a really cool just insight into what's going on in the market every month. So until next time, thanks again, Nicole.
Thank you, Mike.
And from me, Mike Dixon, keep on listening to our podcast to help your future in sales and marketing. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast from AXR Recruitment and Search. We're passionate about helping you get the most out of your sales and marketing career. Keep listening as we bring you more career insights and advice from Australia's top sales and marketing leaders. You just can't get this career advice anywhere else. My name is Mike Dixon. See you next time on Your Future in Sales and Marketing.